Once upon a time, in an old stone monastery, set in a hillside covered with vines, there lived a monk called Brother Heinrich. Brother Heinrich wasn't like all the other monks who lived in the monastery. They used to spend their time together working in the monastery vineyards, looking after the vines, picking the grapes, and making wine. The wine from their monastery was the finest and juiciest in all the land, and the people came from far and wide to try it. Except that is, Brother Heinrich had to help make the wine too, but he worked by himself, except that is, for Sigismund. Sigismund was the donkey who worked the wine press that squeezed the grapes. The wine press stood in a little cobbled courtyard, and Sigismund had to walk round and round the courtyard all day, pulling a long wooden arm that made the wine press work. Brother Heinrich put the grapes in, waited for the grape juice to trickle out into the big stone jar. When the jar filled up, he took it away to the cellars and fetched back an empty one. It was rather boring work for both of them, but they didn't mind. Brother Heinrich liked to talk to Sigismund, and Sigismund liked to listen. Sometimes he would answer Brother Heinrich in a friendly sort of way. Brother Heinrich talked about all sorts of things. How to eat wine jelly without it falling off your spoon. How to stop the mice biting your toes when you've got sandals on. But most of all, he liked to talk about music. Brother Heinrich loved music. He knew how to play lots of different instruments, even difficult ones, like the sackbut and the harp. He was good at singing, too. In fact, he sang so well that the abbot put him in charge of the monastery choir. Every day, when it was time for work to finish, Brother Heinrich took Sigismund back to his stable, gave him some hay, wished him good night, and hurried off to choir practice. But he felt sad that Sigismund was left out, so sometimes he let him come along to choir practice to sing with the choir. Sigismund liked that very much. He stood on his hind legs in the choir stalls and tried hard to follow the music, just like all the others in the choir. Brother Heinrich lent him an old pair of spectacles so he could read better. Sigismund felt very important. He joined in all the songs that the choir sang, though sometimes his voice did stick out a bit. One day, when Brother Heinrich and Sigismund were working as usual at the wine press, one of the other brothers came running up to them. "Brother Heinrich," he said, still out of breath, "the abbot wants to see you immediately." Brother Heinrich groaned. The abbot, who was the head of the monastery, was always complaining and interfering, and when he wanted to see people, it usually meant trouble. "Oh, what does he want, Brother Joseph?" asked Brother Heinrich. "I don't know, but you better hurry," answered Brother Joseph. So Brother Heinrich hurried off to the abbot's room and knocked at the door. "Come in," said the abbot, rather sourly. He was sitting at his desk reading a long and important-looking letter. He looked up. "Brother Heinrich," he began, "I have just received this letter from the Archbishop. He tells me he will be traveling through this part of the country on important business at Christmas time, and we'd like to come in person to our Christmas morning service and Christmas dinner afterward." The abbot was cross. He didn't like the Archbishop's visits very much because it meant lots of cleaning and tidying and telling everyone to be on their best behavior. The other ones didn't mind, though. The Archbishop was plump and jolly, and he never seemed to notice even if things were a bit untidy. He often happened to be traveling through their part of the country on important business at Christmas. "The Archbishop himself will be at our Christmas morning service," continued the abbot. "The choir is your responsibility, Brother Heinrich. You must make sure they sing better than they have ever sung before." "I'll do my best," promised Brother Heinrich. "And one more thing," said the abbot. "That Archbishop think if he sees a donkey singing in our monastery choir? It'll make a laughing stock of us all. Besides, he could only sing 2 notes, E and Ah. Well, that's not fair, Father Abbot, protested Brother Heinrich. Brother Ignatius has been in the choir for 50 years, and he can only sing 1 note, and it's nearly always the wrong one. Not another word, interrupted the abbot. The donkey must go, and that's final. Brother Heinrich felt very sad as he walked back to the little courtyard where Sigismund was still walking round and round. He didn't want to tell him the bad news. He cleared his throat. Sigismund, the Archbishop is coming to our Christmas morning service, he began. But I'm afraid the abbot says you can't sing in the choir anymore. Sigismund carried on walking round and round. Oh, well, he thought to himself, I suppose I didn't have much of a voice anyway. Brother Heinrich tried to cheer him up. I promise I'll tell you how all the rehearsals go, and I'll teach you all the new songs we do. But they both knew it wouldn't be the same. Rehearsals began for the Christmas morning service. Brother Heinrich stood in front of the choir, beating time with a twig and singing very loudly. They practiced hard every day, but somehow nothing seemed to go right. Secretly, everyone missed Sigismund. Soon, the monks of the choir started to complain. We're bored with these same stupid songs, said one of them. Nothing but the same old Christmas carols year after year, said another. You're supposed to be so good at music, said one of the younger monks. Well, why don't you write us a new carol so we don't have to do the same ones over again? Hails, write us a new carol, cried everyone together. Except Brother Ignatius, who preferred the old carols anyway. But I've never written a carol before, protested Brother Heinrich. Well, you'll just have to do your best, said the others. A new carol will make all the difference to the Christmas service. So Brother Heinrich cut himself a new quill from an eagle's feather and laid in a supply of fresh parchment. Every night, he sat down at the desk in his little room to try to write his new carol. He tried and he tried. All sorts of ideas came into his head, but somehow none of them was quite right. And the abbot has got to hear about it and keeps asking if I've written it yet. Sigismund looked at him sympathetically. Brother Heinrich kept on trying, but he still couldn't seem to write his new carol. Finally, Christmas Eve came. All day he paced up and down his room and scribbled frantically, while Sigismund, whose work was over for the season, sat in a corner watching anxiously. By the evening, there was still nothing on the parchment but crossings out. It's no good, Sigismund, he said sadly. I'll have to give up. Looks as if it isn't going to be a very merry Christmas for either of us. The abbot doesn't want you in the choir anymore, and now the choir isn't going to want me anymore because I can't write the new carol. Come on, I better put you in your stable. The two of them walked slowly, side by side, across the courtyard toward the stables. It was a bright, starry night, and the only sound to be heard was the clip-clop of Sigismund's hooves across the cobblestones. At least Brother Heinrich thought it was the only sound to be heard. Stop a minute, Sigismund, he said. Listen, do you hear something? Sigismund stopped and pricked up his ears, and then shook his head and walked on again. Sigismund, there is something. Listen. angels disappeared. And all that was left was Brother Heinrich dizzy on the ground with Sigismund beside him. Did it really happen, Sigismund? Wondered Brother Heinrich. That was such a beautiful song the angels sang. If only I could write a carol just like that, we could sing it at the Christmas service tomorrow. Sigismund, why don't we sing the angels' carol at the Christmas service? If I go and write it down right now, we can practice it first thing in the morning, and it'll be ready for the service. I'll tell the choir the angels sang it to me. Brother Heinrich rushed back to his room with Sigismund clip-clopping close behind him. He sat down excitedly at his desk, dipped his quill in the ink pot, and started writing out the angels' carol as fast as he could go, sprinkling sand on the parchment every so often to help the ink to dry. He tried all sorts of different endings. But none of them was the same as the angels had sung. Oh, Sigismund, wailed Brother Heinrich. We're not going to be able to do the angels' carol after all. I can't remember the last bit. See, the tune's no use without an ending. What was that, Sigismund? Brother Heinrich clapped his hands. Sigismund, that's it. Now I remember how the tune ends. Brother Heinrich quickly wrote down the last bit of the tune in case he forgot it. Then the two of them danced round and round the little room, singing the angels' carol until they both fell asleep, exhausted. Early next morning, Brother Heinrich ran to find the abbot and tell him everything that had happened. The abbot didn't believe a word of the story about the angels, but he was so relieved that they were going to have a new carol to sing to the Archbishop after all. As a special concession, he said he would allow Sigismund to sing in the choir again just this once. Brother Heinrich was overjoyed. He ran off to tell Sigismund, who could hardly believe his good fortune, and the two of them hurried off to choir practice. The choir rehearsed the angels' carol until it was perfect. Now it was almost time for the Christmas service to begin. And they all took their places in the choir stalls just before the Archbishop's solemn procession began. The service went beautifully, and everyone was very excited when the moment came for the angels' carol. My friends, he said, this has been a very special Christmas for us all. Your abbot tells me that the fine new carol we heard this morning was sung to Brother Heinrich by the angels. If it be so, it is surely a miracle, and we should thank God for it. As for the donkey that sings in the choir, your abbot fears I might think him a strange sight. Well, my friends, there are times when I see far stranger sights than a harmless donkey singing in a choir. Long may he continue a member. Though he sings only 2 notes, there are surely times when those 2 notes are exactly the right ones. Brother Heinrich and Suzie smiled to each other. So, my friends, concluded the beaming Archbishop, God's blessing upon this house and upon all that is accomplished here. And a Merry Christmas to one and all. Do you think he knew about how you finished the angel's carol for me? Said Brother Heinrich to Sigismund as he led him back to his stable afterwards. But Sigismund only answered the same way he always did. That night, the 2 friends both went to sleep very happy and still thinking about their wonderful experience with the angels. They were sure of one thing. It had been the very best Christmas they had ever had.